Linton Kwesi Johnson was born in 1952 in Chapeltown, Jamaica, but he became a UK dub poet, and he's a particularly interesting poet to look at for nation states. He's being kind of entered a classic status. He entered the literary canon with his work being in the Penguin Classic series, but he recites his poetry to music, which is playing along now. His middle name Kwesi is Ghanaian, so originally from his family background, his ancestors' background, were obviously from Ghana, and they were brought over as slaves in the 18th century. He has a really good link with Goldsmiths, having studied here, and Goldsmiths also holds all of his personal papers, which is great news because he's become a very important literary figure in post-colonial studies and is well worth doing a case study on if you are interested. He's always been very political. He was part of the Black Panther movement. It's an extreme left-wing movement, you could say, that was trying to basically organise a revolution so that the workers took control. It's a sort of Marxist movement. And he also has very kind of strong links with the sort of Rasta culture in the Caribbean. Let's look at this exam question. It says, examine the treatment of one of the following in Caribbean writing: Empire, the USA, the idea of rebellion, and race. Well, you could look at Empire, the idea of rebellion, or race with Linton Kwesi Johnson. I'm going to look at the idea of race with reference to a poem he wrote, but there's another poem he wrote called The Great Insurrection, which really lends itself to the idea of rebellion. So that's it. Let's look at this. We're going to look at a poem that focuses on a thing called the sus law. The sus law was a informal name given for the stop and search law that permitted a police officer to arrest people on suspicion of being tramps, basically. This law isn't in place as such at the moment, but it continues to be a significant problem amongst ethnic minorities that they are arrested. So the poem has a link there with the present day, very much so, even though it was written in the 1980s. This is the poem. I'm not even going to attempt to read it out to you. But I want to draw your attention to some key points. You can get the poem on YouTube with the music to go with it. It's well worth hearing Linton Kwesi Johnson sort of sing the poem because it comes across very well. We've got the whole setup is of a Lettah, a Brixton prison, which was notorious in terms of nation states and cultural studies. It was a symbol for the oppression of people from ethnic minorities in the 1980s because disproportionate numbers of them were put in this prison. So it's a sort of emblem of racist oppression, possibly. And then notice he's writing this letter to his ma, and the tone in Sonny's letter is actually very polite, and it actually has a kind of element of humour. Although the subject matter is very dark, there's an element of kind of humour because this boy is a sort of very pleasant boy, clearly, writing in a dialect, and again, let's go back to this question of race. We've got 2 points here. We've got the Brixton prison, which is a sort of emblem of racist oppression, and then we have this dialect that this Sonny, the person writing the poem, is writing in. And notice some of the language. Mek, again, writing in this kind of local Caribbean dialect, Jamaican dialect, and there's a kind of force to the language, isn't there? You can feel it. Or lickle, Jim. Take care of little Jim. There's a kind of, that's what we call a diminutive. It's sort of being affectionate, and me best to look out for him. So there's a tone of real caring about family here, which is very much sort of not what you'd expect perhaps from a criminal in a Brixton prison. This poem breaks stereotypes, doesn't it? And then look at this Lexis here, solemn promise. He says that he was really trying to care for Jim, and it didn't work out. And Jim got arrested in the middle of a rush hour when everyone was a hustle and a bustle, and they were just waiting for a bus when the police came, and 3 policemen, and they were carrying batons, and they took hold of Jim, and Jim told them to let go. He wasn't doing anything. I'm not a thief. I'm not even a button. There was a kind of joke there, isn't there? I haven't stolen anything. Not even a button. Jim started to wriggle. The police started to giggle. Notice that powerful rhyme there. The non-standard spelling, of course, I think emphasising the power of the rhyme. The police kind of taking very lightly what was a very serious situation for Jim and Sonny. And then we have this powerful verse down here. They thump him in the belly and turn to jelly. They pop him in the back, and they hit him on the head. But he was quite sturdy. It was tough like lead. And they kick him, and he starts to bleed. So we have the tone of the poem it begins in a kind of light-hearted fashion and becomes very, very unpleasant, doesn't it? And very plainly spoken. And look at the power of the rhyme, the power of the language, and the power of the repetition, all emphasising the kind of horror of what's going on. Because this is effectively just a racist attack. And what's interesting, if you're focusing on this question of race, is the way in which the speaker of the poem doesn't talk about race here at all, but it is, as a theorist like Spivak might say, or Foucault, it is the other that is at issue here. That Jim and Sonny are the other. They are not seen by the police to be part of culture. They're seen to be antagonists without any evidence at all. They are seen to be legitimate targets to be beaten up, and violence is what is expected. So it's something like you would expect to see in a kind of Nazi state is happening to them. There's sort of similar descriptions you'll find of the Jews being beaten in Nazi Germany. He couldn't stand it. I couldn't do nothing. He started, and so he Sonny hits one of them in the eye, and they kicked him in the shin. He started to spin. His head started to spin. He got him on the chin, and he dropped down and dropped in a bin and crashed down and dead. And then the more police came and beat him to the ground. They charged Jim with the sus. They charged Jim just based on no evidence for being a vagrant, and arrested him, and they charged Sonny with murder. So what's happened is a sort of light-hearted beginning of the poem has turned into horrific situation. It's well worth you looking back over the poem and picking out lines of special interest to you that really convey the horror of the racist treatment that these two characters face, and then look at the techniques of the author in highlighting it. His use of the dialect, his use of rhyme, his use of rhythm. Listen to what he does. The structure of the letter is interesting as well. This is a polite, almost formal letter to the mother. He's reassuring her not to worry, and yet of course he is in the worst possible trouble, for accused of murdering a policeman. There's a lot of Johnson on the Poetry Archive, and that's well worth looking. There's also sort of linked to Caribbean research into poetry there, which is worth looking at if you want to look at him. And then there's his great poem, The Great Insurrection, which is about the Brixton riots, and rewriting those Brixton riots as a form of legitimate rebellion against English culture. And I want you to think about this. Johnson is perhaps the most political of all post-colonial poets. I mean, he is essentially sort of a Marxist cultural theorist. He's a serious academic in himself now, and not as well as being a very well-respected poet. What is his message here? I mean, he's, for all his politics, a poem like Sonny's Lettah, it's not immediately obvious what's going on here. Although the poem is about racism, the issue of race is never actually talked about in there, which is quite interesting, isn't it, to investigate why that's the case. And what's he saying about identity? That he seems to be suggesting that the English identity is shaped by these horrific attitudes towards other cultures, and perhaps implicating, England in a sort of Nazi-like attitude. And then look at other poets, compare them in their attitudes. We looked at Michael Smith, we've looked at a number of poets in the Caribbean poetry collection, and look at their use of poetic form, and look at the way they explore the issue of Caribbean and English identity. These are three important thinkers about this, and it's quite useful to bring some of the theorists in to your exploration of the poetry. So Lamming is very condemning of this myth of English supremacy, which obviously seems to lie behind some of the police's reasons for beating up these two, Sonny and Jim, and the English are enacting, the English policemen are enacting quite literally the kind of power relationships that happen between the colonial subject and the colonialist on English territory, aren't they? There's a sort of resentment that the colonial subject has come to England and is wanting to live a life as an equal, when that for the English policeman there and the legal system seems to be a real problem. And then we've got Spivak, I mean, very relevant to Linton Kwesi Johnson, the impossibility of the subaltern speaking. Is this true? Is Sonny articulating his own worldview? Or is it constantly in definition against his antagonist, the racist police? Does Linton Kwesi Johnson manage to shape and formulate his own voice? And then the discourses of colonialism have filtered into every sphere: science, art, anthropology. Well, is this true? We get, and the law. We get a sense of that with this poem, and Said's thinking is worth considering there. So there are some common threads that you'll find in all of the theorists and all of the literature that are worth drawing out. This myth of supremacy, of a hierarchy of knowledge, a right way to do things, a codification, a literary canon, great works of art, the supremacy of the Western approaches to subjects, the scientific, the materialistic, the religious approaches, are all embedded in so much writing that we look at, so much literature we look at. Can someone like Linton Kwesi Johnson manage to sort of turn these things on the head and question them sufficiently? And then you've got the other thread, is that the colonial subject is largely silenced. He's the invisible other. The colonial subject is often turned into the exotic. For example, looking at Caribbean tourism, or demonised, looking at the as terrorists or tramps or wastrels or wasters, and then all the kind of racist abuse that colonial subjects can be subjected to. The unseen effects of colonialism, and I suppose perhaps Linton Kwesi Johnson does explore that. I mean, the setting is England and Brixton, but we feel, don't we, in England and Brixton, the attitudes of colonialism are being enacted out again. The England has become the new theatre for the colonialists to impose their kind of worldviews on their subjects. Well worth thinking about that. And then there's also, the problem of studying this. Lamming suggesting a kind of fiction can liberate, or poetry. That's obviously Linton Kwesi Johnson's attitude, that poetry and music can somehow address some of this power imbalance, whereas Spivak feels there's no solution.